Good Monday, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for March the 27th. Thanks so much for a little bit of patience today, getting this video out a little bit later than usual. I don't think I have used any tissues today, so hopefully that will continue on. I do, again, appreciate your patience. Let me get the text of Leviticus chapter 16 up on the screen for us. This is probably one of the more well-known chapters in Leviticus, ones that Christians probably go to more than any else, simply because this is a chapter that contains something that we're at least somewhat familiar with, specifically thinking about Jesus and the way he is tied in together in the book of Hebrews concerning the Day of Atonement, the way he would function as our high priest. But we want to think about this today here in this text and try to keep it in its context to see what exactly is going on here for the Jewish mind in regard to the Day of Atonement. So let's read here in Leviticus chapter 16 and verse number 1. Yahweh spoke to Moses after the death of two of Aaron's sons when they approached the presence of Yahweh and died. Yahweh said to Moses, "Tell your brother Aaron that he may not come whenever he wants into the holy place, behind the curtain, in front of the mercy seat, on the ark, or else he will die, because I appear in the cloud above the mercy seat." Aaron is to enter the most holy place in this way, with a young bull for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He is to wear a holy linen tunic, and linen undergarments are to be on his body. He is to tie a linen sash around him and wrap his head with a linen turban. These are holy garments. He must bathe his body with water before he wears them. He is to take from the Israelite community 2 male goats for a sin offering and 1 ram for a burnt offering. Aaron will present the bull for his sin offering and make atonement for himself and his household. Next, he will take 2 goats and place them before Yahweh at the entrance to the tent of meeting. After Aaron casts lots for the 2 goats, 1 lot for Yahweh and the other for an uninhabitable place, or the Hebrew word behind this phrase is Azazel. He is to present the goat chosen by lot for Yahweh and sacrifice it as a sin offering, but the goat chosen by lot for Azazel or an uninhabited place is to be presented alive before Yahweh to make atonement with it by sending it into the wilderness for an uninhabitable place. When Aaron presented the bull for his sin offering and makes atonement for himself and his household, he will slaughter the bull for his sin offering. Then he is to take a fire pan full of blazing coals from the altar before Yahweh and 2 handfuls of finely ground fragrant incense and bring them inside the curtain. He is to put the incense on the fire before Yahweh so that the cloud of incense covers the mercy seat that is over the testimony, or else he will die. He is to take some of the bull's blood and sprinkle it with his fingers against the east side of the mercy seat. Then he will sprinkle some of the blood with his fingers before the mercy seat 7 times. When he slaughters the male goat for the people's sin offering and brings its blood inside the curtain, he will do the same with its blood as he did with the bull's blood. He is to sprinkle it against the mercy seat and in front of it. He will make atonement for the most holy place in this way for all their sins because of the Israelites' impurities and rebellious acts. He will do the same for the tent of meeting that remains among them because it is surrounded by their impurities. No one may be in the tent of meeting from the time he enters to make atonement in the most holy place until he leaves after he has made atonement for himself, his household, and the whole assembly of Israel. Then he will go out to the altar that is before Yahweh and make atonement for it. He is to take some of the bull's blood and some of the goat's blood and put it on the horns on all sides of the altar. He is to sprinkle some of the blood on it with his finger 7 times to cleanse and set it apart from the Israelites' impurities. When he has finished making atonement for the most holy place, the tent of meeting, and the altar, he is to present the live male goat. Aaron will lay both his hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the Israelites' iniquities and rebellious acts, all their sins. He is to put them on the goat's head and send it away from the wilderness by the man appointed for the task. The goats will carry all their iniquities into a desolate land, or will carry all their iniquities to Azazel, the idea here, and the man will release it there. Then Aaron is to enter the tent of meeting, take off the linen garments he wore when he entered the most holy place, and leave them there. He will bathe his body with water in a holy place and put on his clothes. Then he must go out and sacrifice his burnt offering and the people's burnt offering. He will make atonement for himself and for the people. He is to burn the fat of the sin offering on the altar. The man who released the goat for Azazel or an uninhabited place is to wash his clothes and bathe his body with water. Afterward, he may re-enter the camp. The bull for the sin offering and the goat for the sin offering, whose blood was brought into the most holy place to make atonement, must be brought outside the camp, and their hide, flesh, and waste burned. The one who burns them is to wash his clothes and bathe himself with water. Afterward, he may re-enter the camp. This is to be a permanent statute for you. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you are to practice self-denial and do no work, both the native and the alien who resides among you. Atonement will be made for you on this day to cleanse you, and you will be cleansed, and you will be clean from all your sins before Yahweh. It is a Sabbath of complete rest for you, and you must practice self-denial. It is a permanent statute. The priest who is anointed and ordained to serve as high priest in place of his father will make atonement. He will put on the linen garments, the holy garments, and make atonement for the most holy place. He will make atonement for the tent of meeting and the altar, and will make atonement for the priest and all the people of the assembly. This is to be a permanent statute for you, to make atonement for the Israelites once a year because of all their sins, and all this was done as Yahweh commanded Moses. And that is Leviticus chapter 16. All right, so what is the main focus of the Day of Atonement? I would say the way it is, the way we probably think of it from a Christian perspective is the day in which the people are atoned for. That's what Jesus did, atone for the people. But here in this text in Leviticus 16, it probably has a bit of a different perspective that we ought to be reading this in. It's not the people that are the main focus, it seems, because the blood of the people, or the blood is not applied to the people as it was previously in regard to the priests whenever they were purified, or when an unclean person was purified, or when a sacrifice was offered on behalf of the people primarily. No, the primary focus here seems to be that this is an atonement or a purification day for the sacred space that was the tabernacle and everything associated with it. This was a day on which sacred space was purified. It was a day in which the sacred space of, again, the tabernacle was reset. As we read through the text, you probably noticed a number of times where it spoke about the Israelites' impurities and their rebellious acts. Remember, part of the whole clean, unclean, pure, impure dynamic is the fact that if you were unclean or impure, then you could not come into sacred space. That was a violation of God's holiness. But what happens if that happened accidentally? What happens if somebody does not know they are unclean, yet they are, and they come in contact with someone else, and that someone else comes into the presence of Yahweh? Then there has been uncleanness in the presence of Yahweh. It seems that this day was a day to reset all of that, to reset it, to atone for everything, to make everything right so they can move forward then in the correct manner. It's also important, I think, to note that this took place after the death of Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, that they violated sacred space in going, either taking something somewhere it ought not to have been, or going into a place they might not have, they should not have been, whether that's going into the holy place or not, or maybe it was doing so in a drunken state. Again, going back to chapter 10, there's a number of different ways you can understand what it is that they might have done wrong. The main point being they violated sacred space in some way. Therefore, here is this instruction now that you can't do that. Sacred space matters, and sacred space needs to be respected. And if there's a possibility that the sacred space has unknowingly been violated, then that needs to be atoned for in this way. It's atoned for with a bull and then the 2 goats. Maybe something else good to note is verses 3, 4, and 5, in which whenever Aaron or whoever the high priest is at the time goes in to take care of this issue, they don't dress, it seems, if I'm reading this correctly, they don't dress in the normal high priestly garb. that as they present themselves before the people, they have all the very ornate clothing. Here, it seems to be very normal, humble clothing because they are appearing before God, and there is no need to try to present himself as being anything more than just a normal person in front of Yahweh, because it's Yahweh in this scene who matters and who needs to really be paid attention to. The first thing he has to do in doing this is to purify himself. So he does the purification for his own self. That way he can actually enter into the presence of Yahweh. He does that with the bull. And then there is the lots that have to be cast for the 2 goats. 1 goat would be given to Yahweh for the sacrifice. The other goat would be given for an uninhabitable place. Again, the Hebrew word behind this is the Hebrew word Azazel, which, depending on your translation, you might have Azazel here in the text, or you might have, as the CSB puts it, an uninhabitable place. So translation from Hebrew is a tricky thing. It depends on a number of things. Remember, Hebrew is just consonants. So there is the different consonants represent different things. And if you insert different vowels, as we would call them, into them, it could turn out to be different things. That's kind of the idea here. Some people think that this Azazel is a word that ends up translating into something like the goat that departs, or for the removal, or for a rough, difficult place, or even for a goat demon is another possible translation here. Or it could be the Azazel's an actual name, not a common noun, but what's the word I'm thinking of now? A proper noun. That it would be a name in some sense. The problem is that this word only appears 3 times in all of Scripture, and all 3 of those times are here in this text. So there's not really anything else to compare it with to try to come to a proper, really rock solid understanding. So sometimes in your footnotes, whenever you have Hebrew words like that, you'll see maybe a footnote that says something about the Hebrew being obscure. That's kind of what's going on here, that this is an obscure term. But at the end of the day, I think with this goat, and as we'll see as we'll go through here, actually, I'll hold off to get to that in a minute. Talk about this goat, what actually is going on here. So he gets everything he needs. He gets on the regular clothes, the linen garments that are mentioned in 3 through 5. He gets the bull and these 2 goats and does what he needs to do with them. He slaughters the bull for himself. Then he gets a fire pan of blazing coals for the altar. He puts incense on them, and he goes in and he offers up this incense, and it creates, he goes behind the curtain, he offers up this incense, which creates a big smoke cloud in between Aaron and the ark, seemingly to offer some protection for Aaron himself. At that time, he takes some of the bull's blood, and the text says that he applies it to the east side of the mercy seat. Also does this before the mercy seat 7 times. Then he takes the male goat and puts some of it on the mercy seat. He also ends up putting blood on the tent of meeting. He does so on some other places as well. He puts on the horns of the altar, puts on the altar itself. Again, goes through the process of putting it on the sides of things, and then spritzing it 7 times, sprinkling it 7 times before these various objects within the temple, within the tabernacle. In doing this, note verse 16, he will make atonement for the most holy place in this way. I think that's the focus here of Leviticus 16. The focus is the atonement of the sacred space, of the holy space, again, for these impurities of the Israelites, even their rebellious acts. Everything on this day is reset. Everything on this day is made new, basically. Everything, there's a clean slate that is created here in this moment. After this takes place, verse 20, after he finishes making atonement, again, notice the emphasis here. It's not on the people. The atonement here is for the most holy place, for the tent of meeting, and for the altar. At this point, he is to take the live goat. He's supposed to lay both hands on the head of the live goat, which I think is the only time we see that. Put both hands on the head of the live goat, confess over all of the Israelites' iniquities and rebellious acts, all their sins, everything that might violate sacred space, everything that might cause issues within sacred space. And he's to put them on the goat's head and send it away into the wilderness by the man appointed for the task. This goat will carry all their iniquities into a desolate land, and the man will release it there. So the idea here, it seems, is that he is sending all those things, again, that would violate sacred space, sending them away from Yahweh, sending them away from God, away from his place and his space, getting it out of here. There's even some Jewish traditions that state that the man who would take the goat out would actually go and push the goat over a cliff, just so you make sure that it does not find its way wandering back to the Hebrew camp. Definitely cannot have that. So once that is taken care of, the bull for the sin offering, verse 27, the goat for the sin offering, all those things, the leftovers are taken outside. They're burnt outside the camp. And then the man later on is able to re-enter as well. Verse 29 says that these will be a permanent statute for you in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month. You to practice self-denial. We talked recently about the fasting issue, how this is the one time that fasting was commanded. The self-denial was an issue concerning fasting. You fast, you don't work. This is basically a Sabbath for them, practicing self-denial, and whoever's priest at this time is the one who would carry out all of these things for the people. And again, it was a day of resets. It was an important day because it was a day where any concerns, any curiosities, all of those could be alleviated, because here at this time, in this place, everything was wiped clean, everything was reset, God's sacred space was atoned for, and there was no worry that anybody should have that there was anything amiss, or on this day everything was taken care of. And that was a grace from God, that God would graciously allow this day for the people to alleviate any concerns, any worries, and to have his space atoned for, and to have the people reset as well. And it was just a good day. It was a good day for this to happen. If you see anything today about Yom Kippur, that is the Jews today carrying out a version of these particular practices, even today. I appreciate you tuning in for this reading about over Leviticus 16. If you have any questions about Leviticus 16, please feel free to leave those in the comment section below. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. We'll be back on it tomorrow, regular time, 8 a.m. We'll have our reading, a short reading from from Leviticus chapter 17. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Talk about some paganistic practices that the people had to avoid unless they really wanted to anger Yahweh, their God. Again, thanks for tuning in. Have a great Monday, everyone. Take care. God bless.